they don't want the public to know that there really is a crash retrieval program and that we are monitoring UAP in our airspace and water space. You think the seafloor is all mapped, and the fact is it's not. We've not even mapped 25% of the world's seafloor to a modern standard, meaning multi-beam sonar and GPS navigation. Then it paused and then started closing on them rapidly. And they call that constant bearing decreasing range. And you don't want that when you're a ship driver or a sub driver. And they were so convinced, he called the captain of the bridge, they set general quarters and they dived. And it kept on coming and it kept on coming. I've said this story before, but it's worth going at again. I get this email on the Navy secret network, SIPRNet, and it's from my boss's operation officer. I was reporting to a 4-star admiral, U.S. Fleet Forces Command. His operations officer was a 2-star. And the email was sent to all the subordinate commanders. This is at least 20 flags and SESs. All the deputies are copied on it. And the title of it is Urgent Safety of Flight Issue. All caps. The body of the email said, if any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having numerous near midair collisions, and if we don't stop it, we're going to have to cancel the exercise. And attached to the video was the now famous leaked Go Fast video. F-18 pilots captured video of this UAP zorching over the water. There's no flight control surfaces or propulsion means that are visible. It's just a little round sphere.
What are some of the things you've encountered as an oceanographer that you know?
So here you go. When I was
keep you up at night. Let's talk about the Submariner.
I am what I am. I have the scientific background as an authority on these topics of ocean science and exploration. A submariner came to me, and virtually and he just said, "Hey, I was on a sub in the 80s. I'd like to talk to you about what I saw." First off, as I mentioned, I was a superintendent of the Naval Observatory, so I understood how big the universe was, and I was open-minded to that there could be other life outside of the Earth. And then, as a 1-star, I had actually 2 jobs. I had a Pentagon job, and then I also was an operational commander. So there's a 1-star job in Stennis Space Center, Mississippi, called the Commander of the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. And that's all the folks that did what I did. So there's enlisted aerographers that do weather forecasting on aircraft carriers and shore stations. And there's other folks that, again, advise for anti-submarine warfare. And so all these, about 3,000 people, civilians and uniformed, do things like ocean mapping, weather forecasting, ocean forecasting, and I was in charge of them all. And so I'm in my office that one day, so I was splitting time between the Pentagon and DC and this office in Stennis. And one day I get this email on the Navy secret network, SIPRNet, and it's from my boss's operation officer. I was reporting to a 4-star admiral, U.S. Fleet Forces Command. His operations officer was a 2-star. And the email was sent to all the subordinate commanders. This is at least 20 flags and SESs. All the deputies are copied on it. And the title of it is Urgent Safety of Flight Issue. All caps. And the body of the email said, if any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having numerous near midair collisions. And if we don't stop it, we're going to have to cancel the exercise. And attached to the video was the now famous leaked Go Fast video. You know it, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so UAP, F-18 pilots captured video of this UAP zorching over the water. There's no flight control surfaces or propulsion means that are visible. It's just a little round sphere. And then the pilots are all going crazy, and other videos have mentioned how there were multiple ones out there. And I knew right then and there that was not ours. We don't have technology like that. I was read into a lot of SAPs, to the best of my knowledge, and we would never do that in a training range. Especially aircraft carrier workups are so compressed. they have to do all these things. The pilot's got to get certified. They got to land so many times on the carrier. They got to do all these things and certify to go deploy. So throwing out advanced technology in a training range during a pre-deployment workup just doesn't happen. I mean, people will get fired. So, and of course we have testing ranges to do that. That's of course. So I knew that wasn't ours. I also had been read in all the threat, our adversaries' capabilities. I knew that nobody else had that. And so I knew right there, that was something not ours. Not human, off-world, whatever, it just wasn't ours. And my deputy and I were both open-minded. He was an SES, and I pulled him over, and we've talked about it for a while, and we're just pretty much amazed. But the next day, that email was wiped from my computer, and my deputies, and everybody else. So, okay, it's gone. Wow, I wanted to save that thing. It was interesting. And come to find out, I go to monthly meetings at my boss's headquarters in Norfolk. And we always talk about, staying up with the training cycle, and safety issues always came up. And this was a big safety issue. The ops officer said so. And my job as the chief meteorologist in the Navy, another one of my hats, was safety of flight. And so we get into the next monthly meeting, and no one brings this stuff up. No one's talking about it, about a safety issue almost canceling this major training event. And then you come to find out, one of the pilots flying during those missions, that video was from the USS Theodore Roosevelt's Air Wing. It was Ryan Graves. He's pretty well known now as somebody who's come out, and he's founded an organization I'm on the board of called the Americans for Safe Aerospace, and he's advocating for, with draft legislation out there, to instill reporting protocols for pilots in the FAA, commercial pilots and others, by the FAA, because currently there and pretty much the Navy, if you come out and say, hey, I saw these things, it could be a career killer.
Yeah.
And I'll just, one more point about that. So I couldn't say anything at the time. And by the way, so it was wiped from my computer. I had been read into SAPs, and I knew, oh, okay, this probably was connected to a SAP that the ops officer did not know. And the intelligence officer, one of the intelligence officers probably found that email and said, oh, shoot, and contacted whoever owned it, which was probably DIA. And they did their forensics and took everything off the system. Whoever it was, I don't know. But I had been read into enough SAPs to know, oh, that probably happened, and that's why I didn't have it, and that's why no one's talking about it. But it bothered me, Sean, because, and now that I talk with Ryan, I realize, holy cow, lots of these things were in the airspace. They were interfering with operations, and they were a safety issue.
How many?
I don't know how many, but there were, at one of the gimbal recording, it was another one from that period, and you can hear one of the pilots say, there's a whole fleet of them. So I don't know, but there were a lot, and the pilots were seeing them all the time. And what gets me is that commanders like me, once admirals, who are in charge of the well-being, responsible for the well-being and safety of their people and their forces, they were basically forced to turn a blind eye because of some overclassification issue and make the pilots mitigate the safety threat on their own, which is feckless to me. We should be stepping up as flags, as leaders, and saying, all right, let's address this here. Let's talk about it at the 4-star meeting and make sure we don't have to cancel exercise or see pilots fall out of the sky because of interactions with these things, or avoidance maneuvers that again, so that's why I've come out and been an advocate for what Ryan's doing.
So what is a oceanographer and all the different things that you've done for the government, for the Navy, for the country, why are you focusing on underwater stuff? Yeah,
well, first off, we know we see them in the water too. The last example that I saw was from the USS Omaha off Southern California, a well-known video that Jeremy Corbell, one of the UAP media types, has gotten out there. And there's other examples too. Classified examples I can't talk about, but confirmation that we see these things underwater. And I can tell a story about a submarine officer who came out to me too. But so we know they're in the water, and that's my thing. I've done a whole career of ocean science, and so it's what I know, and it's who my network is. So, and now I'm on 2 national bodies that advise on ocean research, and I'm trying to get UAP studies into their research priorities. One reports to the White House and one's within the national academies. That's why. It's what I know, and I know they're in the water, and we're never going to have a full understanding of the nature of UAP unless we look in the water too. So that's what I can bring to bear on this whole discussion.
How many encounters have we had of UAP, UFO activity in the water?
There's a couple books out on it, and all of them, I think, really lack data. They're mostly anecdotal with interviews of people. One of them is by a guy named Preston Dennett, and it's interesting because he looks at the hotspot phenomena off Southern California. And then there's an older book by a guy named Carl Feint who something called, I think it was called UFOs in the Water. And he also just compiled a wide range of cases, just interviewed people. And so there's a lot, there's several hundred in those. And then Richard Dolan, who's a pretty well-known UAP researcher, he's finishing up a book, and I've seen the draft. And he's got about 600 cases where he's looked at all the books and sources that go back from the 1700s. So I think there was there's some interesting cases in that book, but ultimately it's a lot less than we've seen in the atmosphere because the ocean's not as transparent. But it's worth looking at again because there may be more going on than that amount we know to have existed.
Let's talk about the Submariner.
Yeah, this is a good story. So as I've come out, if you will, or I've been speaking out. And I am what I am. I have the scientific background as an authority on these topics of ocean science and exploration. People have looked to me and said, I bet if I tell him, he seems like a straight shooter, a credible guy, I guess. And so a submariner came to me and virtually and he just said, hey, I was on a sub in the 80s. I'd like to talk to you about what I saw. Okay, yeah, let's have a call. I got on a call with him. He was a nuclear submarine officer. Now he's an engineer, and I think for an energy company. And this guy is like most nuclear submariners I know. He is just the facts. He is by the book, very much that way in his personality. And the story he shared with me was this: he's in the North Atlantic in the 80s. Cold War is hot, and their sub's operating, I wouldn't say super deep, but it was very high sea state because of a storm, 40-foot waves, so they were below that. But even there, they were kind of rocking. Subs can feel that wave action. And so because it was so rough, it creates a lot of ambient noise. And in those conditions, it is really hard to passively detect another submarine. So they felt pretty secure. They weren't going to be detected by a Russian sub, and they probably weren't going to hear one either. And so he's on the watch, and all of a sudden, they get a passive hit, a contact that's moving, off the starboard at some range. I don't know the range, but and then it paused and then started closing on them rapidly. And they call that constant bearing decreasing range. And you don't want that. When you're a ship driver or a sub driver, I drove ships, aircraft carriers, I was a deck watch officer. That's going to be a collision. And they had, that was every feature that a Russian torpedo would have in terms of the constant bearing decreasing range at a very rapid rate. And they were so convinced, he called the captain of the bridge, they set general quarters and they dived. And it kept on coming and it kept on coming, and they were hoping to get below some acoustic lens or whatever that wouldn't be able to find them and lose track, and it just kept coming. And so they went as deep as crush depth, just above it. Crush depth is that depth that a submarine will implode, and that's a dangerous place to be on an older sub like this. But they were convinced this was a Russian sub coming at them. And then at some range close, I don't know what, it paused. And then slowly took station on their stern behind them and trailed them for a while. So they're getting this passive acoustic hit of something doing this. And then after minutes maybe, it just rapidly departed the scene. And they couldn't. There was no explanation. The Russians didn't have technology like that. We didn't have technology like that. And again, to this day, he doesn't know. I want to get that data. The data is collected and archived at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm in the process of reinstating my clearance, and I want to look into that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of examples like this?
So I don't know, but I have talked to one other submariner, nuclear submarine officer, who says that he's not seen that before, but when you go around the Navy and talk to other sonar techs, they say they do see these quite often.
Really?
Yeah, and this guy's very credible. He's actually a reservist, and his day job is he works in the Pentagon.
All
as a civilian.
Attracted to nuclear subs?
I don't know, but this is an interesting thing, and I wrote a paper about this called Beneath the Surface. We may learn more about UAP if we look in the ocean. It's on the Soul Foundation's website, and I write about that because we know, and there's a book on this, that UAP seem to be attracted or active around nuclear sites. Is it because that submarine had a nuclear reactor and had nuclear armed missiles? And what about the Nimitz and the Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carriers? Is because they're nuclear powered? Maybe is that attracting them? I don't know, but it's a very interesting correlation. So I've been in this UAP topic for a little over about 2 years. And I initially, like Michael Herrera, the Marine, where he saw paramilitary forces from some agency, and that whole story, originally I would have dismissed that as, can't be, our government doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. But the more I'm learning and that's coming out, and I could talk about some examples, I wouldn't be surprised if there was credibility to that. Because, for example, there's a book out there by a guy named Greg Bishop called Project Beta. Have you ever heard of it?
I haven't.
This is a really good book right now. It's a
Project Beta.
Project Beta, and it's the subtitle is something like the story of Paul Benowitz and the evolution of the modern UFO myth. And what it's about is a civilian physicist who was on contract to work at for the Air Force, I believe, and ultimately he was one of these people who was a civilian researcher in the UAP in the New Mexico area where that's a hot spot. And the Air Force deliberately deceived him and exploited him and even broke into his house to make him believe that there was going to be an imminent alien invasion. And he basically nearly went crazy. And the Air Force did that deliberately. And
what?
Yeah, yes. The book is really good to read too. You can read it like in a day. It's all happened. The main perpetrator in the Air Force is a guy named Richard Doty. He's quite well known in the UAP circles, and that's what he did. And I can see that happening right now. And we can talk about this later, but you know this DoD UFO office called AARO? Mm-hmm. So they recently released a report.
Real quick, what does AARO stand for again?
All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And their report was looking at the historical kind of story of U.S. government's UAP involvement. Congress directed them to do this report, and they basically didn't do their job. It was a lot of errors. They missed a lot. And one of the prominent UAP authorities on national security, Chris Mellon, wrote a scathing expose, if you will, on all the errors in the report and how they didn't meet the congressional mandate. And when you read that, and you can tell they're obviously obfuscating. They are deliberately not saying what they know and saying things that are patently untrue in this report that Congress directed. And so Chris wrote a great article in the debrief about it and all the flaws. And when you put that together and look at that, you can just see that is active disinformation. They're not acknowledging what they know, and they're actually putting out false information.
Why are they putting out false information?
So this is really, it makes sense if you worked in the government at a high level like me. The executive branch, the National Security Council, upon direction from the president, and the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, They're the ones who could have the say. Should we disclose or not? And the Aero is just doing their bidding, because that executive branch, those bodies, they set the policy of the administration. I saw this in my job under Secretary of Commerce. The Trump administration wanted to do certain things, and we did those things. We actually did a lot of good, and I could talk about that the press never gave us credit for. But that's how it flows. And this administration doesn't want to do that. So Aero is just the mouthpiece. It's the policy at the top level of the executive branch that directs whether they want to disclose or not. Now, it makes a lot of sense because, UFO people want to see it. But if you were Biden, would you want to tell the American public, hey, I can't keep our airspace safe. It's being visited by entities whose intent I don't understand and I can't control it. Same for our water space. Do you think you want to announce that to the American people on the verge of the election and say, I'm not doing my job, I can't keep you all safe? I don't think so.
Probably not. But what is the disinformation piece? Why would the Air Force be planting disinformation in researchers' homes?
Well, that was back then. I'd be hard pressed to see them do that today. But that's it. They went out of control. They were basically not aligned with the Constitution, and they did that because now they don't say it in the book. The book just talks about the facts, but it's the same thing again that's happening today. They don't want the public to know that there really is a crash retrieval program and that we are monitoring UAP in our airspace and water space, and we can't control their actions, and we don't fully understand their intentions, and that's a dangerous thing to leak to the public, and so they are deliberately falsifying it and exploiting people, making them appear as wackos, thus creating a stigma behind the whole scene, which has prevented serious scientific study.
So the disinformation is just to discredit whoever is
that's exactly
getting
it.
into the subject.
That's right. And it's happening overtly today. That office is doing it. And you see it all around the media now. There's just a lot of, there are individuals who I will not name who I believe are getting paid, but every day they get out online and they're well known in this UAP community, and their number one job is to discredit these national authorities, these people like Lou Elizondo, who was with the task force, the UAP task force. I've met and trust and know, and he is 100% who he says he is, and what he says he's seen and knows, I have total confidence in. People like him, he's an active target of people discrediting him and others too.
Interesting.